Hello, and welcome to Catholicism in the Car. My name is Parker Zerbal. Alrighty, so last time we talked about the good news, the gospel, and trying to give some explanation of what exactly that means, because I think a lot of Christians don't think about it a whole lot. They live the good news, and they know that it's good, but they don't always think about why. So, and I've struggled with that in my own life, keeping those three facets that we talked about, that the good news for our present earthly life is that we can unite our sufferings with Christ, and then also, his love for us through that. And then in our heavenly life, the good news is that God preserves us in that state of soul separated from body through a miracle, so that we can enjoy his presence, which is what we call the beatific vision. And then thirdly, the third facet of the good news that I am presenting is that at the end of time, after the second coming of Christ, our bodies will be resurrected and our souls will be united to them, so that we can be truly and fully human beings as we had never been before. Because even now in this life, we are not living to the fullness of our nature. Okay, even a saint who is at the highest, or you could say the most intimate level of relationship of union with God, is not at the same level that of that intimacy that we would be at the resurrection of the body. Now it gets quite similar. That's why you have a lot of saints who exhibit special gifts or miracles, things of that nature, because God is giving them kind of a glimpse of what it will be like when we do have our resurrected bodies. So you think of things like stories like St. Padre Pio would bilocate. He would be in two places at once. Or St. Joseph of Cupertino levitating, which I think I've mentioned before is understood theologically and spiritually. Levitation is really just, it's the soul trying to get to that utter union with God, and the body is following it, and it's enraptured in such a way. And so the soul and the body are almost going through a separation, as would happen in death, although they cannot separate. And so the body is kind of being pulled along by the soul as the soul yearns for that union with God. And from what saints have said about it, it's actually quite painful because of that separation that is going on there. So anyway, we talked about, and I mentioned last time, how, to me, another really good angle to look at the good news is through the Franciscan School of Theology's thesis of the primacy of Christ, which, as we mentioned, basically is saying that Jesus Christ would have become incarnate, that he would have become man, whether man had sinned or not. So there's kind of a story that has been formulated since this kind of thesis came about, and this is also found in many of the Eastern Church Fathers, the Greek Church Fathers, particularly among them Saint Maximus the Confessor. He kind of throws out this idea. I believe Saint Gregory Nazianzen throws out the idea as well. And it's actually where Blessed John Duns Scotus kind of gets this idea from, is from a lot of the Eastern Fathers. And this idea that Christ would have become incarnate regardless of man's sin is much more popular amongst the Eastern Orthodox and then also the Eastern Catholic churches. And also, I would imagine, also the Oriental Orthodox as well. So, the story goes that before the world was created, God had already created the angels, right? And they hadn't fallen yet. And the question is, what made the angels fall? And a lot of Franciscans have speculated that the book of Revelation, chapter 12, which talks about an image being shown in the sky of a woman with crowned with 12 stars on her head, and crowned with 12 stars, and that she was in labor, about to give birth to a male child. And the Franciscans speculate that this is actually the vision that God gave the angels as their test. And what Lucifer, who was one of the highest of the angels in rank, said when he saw this, that a woman, what to the angels would look like a amalgamation of spirit and matter, of angelic nature and the bestial nature, that a woman would bear this son, and the story is that God was basically showing them that he wanted, in the second person of the Blessed Trinity, to become incarnate as a man. And the angels thought that this was, some of them thought that this was absolutely preposterous, and basically, how could God ever do something like this to infuse himself, to intimately unite himself to the flesh. And so, therefore, Lucifer and a third of the angels, as the book of Revelation says, a third of the stars were wiped from the sky. I think it says by the dragon's tail. The dragon wanted to devour the child that was to be born of the woman. Right? So that's kind of where this story comes from. And so the reason for the angels' fall was that God showed them that he was going to become man through a woman. And what this tells us, this kind of story, this Franciscan thesis, is that both Jesus and Mary were willed by God from before the beginning of time, from before all creation. Mary and Jesus were willed to exist. um, by the will of God. And that God would become man, become in flesh, become incarnate, become one with humanity from all of eternity. And I think in a lot of ways, this Franciscan thesis is a reaction to many facets in the church which have often tried to emphasize the soul over the body. And I believe what the Franciscan school through this thesis does very well is showing that the soul and the body are truly one, and they cannot be separated except by a miracle of God. Otherwise, it just creates oblivion. If you separate all the matter from a house, the form no longer exists. There's no longer a house there. It's just a bunch of sticks or wood. In the same way, if you remove the body from the form of the body, which is the soul, nothing exists any longer. And so the Franciscan thesis really doubles down on that idea, which is a doctrine of the church. The Council of Vienna, in one of their canons, so the Council of Vienna was, I want to say 1517, 1515, something like that, said in one of their canons that as a doctrine, I think it would technically be a dogma of the church because it's been promulgated by a council. And I believe, don't quote me on this, but that dogmas are either infallible and irreformable teachings of the Pope, or infallible and irreformable teachings of an ecumenical council in union with the Pope. You'd have to ask somebody like Michael Lofton to clarify that. He's with the Reason and Theology channel. But I believe that that's correct. And what the Council of Vienna said was that the soul is the form of the body, and they're meaning that in the Aristotelian sense. That the soul is the form of the body, which therefore means that the human person is nothing if their soul and body are separated. It no longer exists, except by a miracle of God. Okay? So, I think the Franciscan thesis really emphasizes this, and it shuns that sort of dualist mentality to where the soul is kind of encased within the body, or the soul can exist without the body. The soul is just some spiritual thing that, and the body is just something that needs to be gotten rid of. And that really is a very anti-Christian idea, because it rejects the entire history of salvation. That before the fall, man was not meant to die. His soul and his body were not meant to be separated. And after the second coming of Christ, our bodies and our souls will be reunited again for all of eternity. We are not meant to live in this dualist state, this separate state, where soul and body are separated. So I think the Franciscan thesis does a really beautiful job of emphasizing that by saying that from all of eternity, God willed to become man. And because of that, he also willed Our Lady. He willed Mary to be his mother from all of eternity. So, and that's why it's called the thesis of the primacy of Christ. That Christ was the first willed by God, like Christ being, God incarnate. That the first thing that was willed by the Trinity was that the second person of the Blessed Trinity would become incarnate. And therefore, there's also a secondary primacy of Mary. That Mary was the second-willed member of creation. They were not first in creation, but they were first in the mind of God. Adam and Eve were first in creation. But Adam and Eve were, you could say in a certain sense, a means to an end, so that their descendants would be, one of their descendants would be Mary, through which God would become incarnate in Jesus Christ. All right. Thank you. Oh, real quick, please feel free to subscribe to any of my podcasts on any of the podcast players. Find me on YouTube. Please subscribe. Like me on Facebook, like the Catholicism Car channel on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're all there. Catholicism Car. And then I also have a Patreon account if you wish to support what I do at this podcast and this YouTube channel. And you can also support us on Anchor.fm. There's a support button there you click on. I also have links to all this on my website's support page at www.catholicisminthecar.com.